the presentation I'm going to do today is something that I had just really put together just for this purpose. It's not something that I normally do. Normally, I'm a wealth advisor. I speak on all aspects of wealth planning, financial management, retirement planning, and so forth. So this is something that, as I described to Barb a little bit, was a little bit therapeutic and kind of putting it through the different stages and that I went through kind of building a business and kind of where I exited the business and why I exited the business. So I hope, within the material that we have today, though, there's some nugget, something that you can take out of this, hopefully, that will help your individual situation, whatever stage of business that you're in. So I really look at the business kind of as I look back on things over the several years that I had started this is really kind of four stages, kind of the infancy, the childhood, adolescent, and kind of mature. And as you'll see in this process, what I would describe as the adolescent, kind of in that 10 to $50 million of revenue range, that's really where I sold. We got up to about 40 million of revenue from zero. And I sold at that point, and I'll share with you why, as we go through this presentation. So kind of the infancy, is that kind of that, hopefully getting up to at least $1 million of revenue, really learning to sell, something profitably. And we'll look at these a little bit more in depth in just a second. And then childhood, really getting up to that $10 million range, hopefully, becoming profitable. And hopefully, that's your fastest kind of stage where you can get from that 1 million to $10 million process. And then the adolescent, a lot of things change, and that's really a difficult period because a lot of things are changing with the business, and a lot of times requires kind of a step back to invest in certain things that maybe you don't really want to spend money on, but you really need to. And then kind of that mature stage overall. So each one of these has different problems, challenges, and so forth, and opportunities. So stage one, main problem is, you're starting something from scratch and you really don't know what you're doing. You really don't. You may have, as far as running a business, you may have a lot of expert knowledge in the area that you're in, but you're really putting it all together into a business format is something that you really haven't done at this point. So there's a lot to learn. First, real challenge is really kind of developing a process to make a profitable sale. You can have depending on what type of business that you're in, if it's in a, larger company situation, maybe it's pricing a service or product right, that's really profitable. And then after you get that, to a profitable situation is really getting a critical mass of customers to really get yourself off the ground so you can stay in business long enough to get to the next stage. So most businesses, don't make it. Most businesses fail, so getting to that next stage, but really the first step, and this is really that timeline, hopefully shorter than 5 years, hopefully that 1 year, kind of 1 year period is really getting to that profitable sale and then starting to really get a critical mass of customers. So stage two, you're really at a stage where maybe you're just breaking even, maybe you're still losing a little bit of money before you can get kind of to the back end of stage two. Challenge is really creating, additional profitable products, really increasing cash flow. But all this stage two is really about is profitability and getting up enough revenue, to kind of get to that next stage. Stage three is, systems all of a sudden start to change. Things get a little bit strained. Sometimes all of a sudden, you started as an entrepreneurial, kind of system, but then all of a sudden you maybe lose a little bit of that. And maybe your customers start to notice things are a little bit different. All of a sudden you've got a little bit of chaos, in the business. You're trying to staff up, trying to add people. A lot of things, all of a sudden, you really need to delegate more strongly. Learning to establish, different protocols, processes, integration of technology. And this is where, really a lot of things can go wrong at this stage. I would say in my stage, as I'll talk about in a little bit, the biggest thing that changed here was as I got more advisors and I added more reps, was really underestimating the compliance aspects of that and what needed to be invested in compliance. And that's where things start to go wrong a little bit. where you have to kind of pull back. So probably one of my mistakes at this stage was really uh, underestimating the investment in both personnel and systems on the technology side to really relate to the compliance side. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I had at this stage. Stage four, when you get to a certain point, it's hard to, kind of ramp up the growth at the same percentages that you were ramping up previously. So maybe things kind of plateau a little bit as far as your growth goes. And it's kind of hard to revisit kind of back to being an entrepreneur again because all of a sudden things have changed. Getting the business to run itself by having the key people in place. Now, I think I was able to do that at stage three, but that's really about delegation and some of the other things that we'll talk about. So size does matter, and I like Malcolm Gladwell a lot. I think I've read all of his books, at some point. And one of the things that he said in the tipping point was really effective communication. You can really only do that to 6 or 7 people, and really having that team. So if you're trying to manage every aspect and micromanage every aspect of your business, most likely you're going to fail. You just can't. You're spread too thin. I've seen it happen so many times with people where they want to control every little aspect of it, and you can't do it. That really, in this book, they showed scientific studies that says you can really only communicate to really 6 or 7 people. I mean, and that should be your management team. So my management team at that time was my chief operating officer, my chief compliance officer, my CFO. Then I had a head of director of sales and marketing, and then I had a business development, and that was my team. Now, anything else so I only primarily communicated direction to those individual people, and those people then were responsible for having their 6 or 7 people. Not all of them had 6 or 7, but that's what we would kind of work with. So, meaning that, the message that you have to bring, you have to trust the people that you're bringing it to bring that message, to bring your vision, to bring your processes, your systems to everyone else, but you can't bring it to everybody at the same exact time. Now, there's still communication, I feel, that was really important to all 230 people that were in my organization. So there was still that I had to show myself really still being the leader of that organization, still expressing the vision of that organization, but not communicating and directing 230 people, directing 6 people. In my case, it was 5. So that's kind of what I kept it to. But if you think about that, that's what you should, in my opinion, kind of have, kind of going forward. So if, each of those 7 people that you can kind of effectively communicate to, they should really only have about the same amount, that they're carrying it out to as well. So retention, and I think the biggest issue that, most entrepreneurs and building a business have is just really the recruiting process. Is really adding individuals, and it's just not easy. And I think in today's environment, where there's 1.6 job openings for every 1 person that's looking for a job, the market is a little bit different, and it's probably going to contract a little bit, as we go forward. But right now, it's still pretty challenging because there's opportunities for people that are out there. So when you look at this, I think if you're hitting about 75%, in your experience of hiring people, where that person really is an effective person for you and really stays a legitimate amount of time, you're doing pretty good, But if you're expecting 100% kind of retention, and that's your goal, is to kind of keep everybody happy, you're probably spending too much time trying to keep employees happy and not enough time selling, in my opinion. So when you look at that, I don't think you can really achieve 100% retention, and I don't think it's necessarily healthy. I think having a little bit of turnover is healthy. When we looked at that as a small company, kind of growing forward, if we did have turnover, and we had plenty of people that stayed, with me for 10, 15, even 20 years, but we did have some turnover. And when we looked at that, it was always an opportunity to look at the organization and say, things have moved, things have changed. What do I need now versus what I needed then? And in my experience, then all that the turnover, the little turnover that we had, always turned out to be healthy because then I can recruit for the set of skills that I needed at that particular time for the opportunity that we had at that particular time. So it was kind of healthy as a process going forward. But again, I wouldn't, sometimes I see entrepreneurs and they're just really trying to, at all costs, keep people because it's hard to look for people and it's hard to find people. But a little bit of turnover can be healthy, over a period of time. But when you do find that rock star employee, and if you've got one in your organization, you want to hang on to them, and the rock stars are exceptional. But when you have one of those people, you want to make sure that they're properly incentivized, make sure their income is current and more than current in today's environment. So if you pay that person that's really a critical piece of your organization or really valuable, a little bit above market, you should be, because you don't want that person to leave. So you have to kind of classify, I think, your people a little bit in that process of recruiting. But recruiting is always one of the hardest parts. The hardest position that I had to recruit was the chief compliance officer. So in my business, the chief compliance officer had to make sure that the firm, the broker dealer and the investment advisor and all of our, financial advisors were following all the SEC and FINRA rules. And to me, it's the least favorite part of the job is dealing with regulators, and this person is doing that full time. So that was always the hardest person to find because you had to have the knowledge base, but then having somebody that not only had the knowledge base but had that skill set, but then could be able to communicate with advisors who are generally kind of more salesy oriented people was always very difficult. So, so it's some positions just aren't easy to fill. And when you do find the right person, especially for that harder position to fill, you want to make sure you hang on to them. For businesses to grow, I think you always have to have new and useful product ideas. So you can't get stuck into the same, even if you're in a service business, you really have to look at other things, in my opinion, that you can add to generate revenue. But new and useful products. And I'll give you a couple ideas. One of the things that I saw, from my experience in the business was that you saw kind of a divide between the big firms and the super high net worth individuals. And, your typical, what I would say, average net worth retail type investor not having access, to some of the things that the highest net worth people had access to. So one of the things I saw in the marketplace was how could I deliver those things, to those to everyone, to other people? How can I deliver those strategies that are valuable? So let's say the top hedge fund in the world, like a Millennium Trust or something like that, their minimum investment, might be $10 to $25 million to set up one account. So it eliminates, a good chunk of people, obviously, that's out there in the world. But how could I bring that to individuals? So if you think about your business and whatever it is, and you look at maybe there's a way to bring access or bring something that's unique and different that's out there in the marketplace, but bring it to more of a mass audience within what you're doing. So what we did was we put together a program to bring those top hedge funds down to individuals that, for as low as $500,000. So so kind of being creative and with a combination of a couple other partnerships, we were able to do that. The other thing I saw in the marketplace was that the IPO market really changed. When I was, 20 years ago, we used to clamor to try to get IPO shares, to be in the offering, to get an allocation, from the brokerage firm. Then the markets really changed. So what we saw was that the companies were staying private considerably longer than they had in the past. They were raising significantly more money than they had in the past. And then the IPO now is not really the opportunity that it was back 20 years ago. Now it's really a liquidity event for those people that were in much earlier. So, in other words, if you weren't in 4, 5, 6 years before the IPO, the opportunity is really past because of what's changed in the marketplace. So again, looking at that, we looked at how could we get individuals that weren't institutions, weren't $100 million, putting 50 and $100 million into things. How could we bring that down to them? So we did that. So we developed a fund called, and that's what was described as the first one was WEG Fund One. The second one is Midway Venture Partners, where we're accessing those kind of later stage, well-funded opportunities, but bringing those down to individuals. So if you think about buying like an Airbnb or a Palantir 4 years before they come public, well, most individuals can't do that. So what I'm saying is look at unique ideas where you can maybe bring something to the marketplace that where it's out there in the marketplace, but maybe not everybody has access to it. So unique money management platforms. So one of the things that you see, especially in this environment, is that we don't see people really playing defense, with their portfolios. We've had a horrible year investing wise, but there's a lot of ways and systems that, the bigger hedge funds use to protect the downside. So we brought those even outside of the hedge fund environment and brought those down to individuals. So we have a lot of people that, instead of being down 15 and 20% this year, maybe down 4 or 3, or not down at all. So bringing those type of strategies, again, those are strategies that the big guys use and have used for a long time. But all we did was say, how could we bring those to other people? So again, new and useful product ideas, bringing those things to individual clients, kind of thinking a little bit outside the box, with those. Selling those products profitably, obviously you have to distribute and be able to have, the correct margins built into anything that you're doing. Managing those processes and procedures efficiently. So I'm a big believer in systematizing everything and then really focusing on the activities that are the most profitable and delegating everything else. So any way that you can systematize essentially everything you do is then a way that you can teach it, grow, and scale. If you can't systematize it, you can't scale it. So everything in my process, from the first meeting with the client, the letters that go out, the second meeting with the client, the third meeting with the client, everything is systematized in a process. And then what I did was teach that process to other financial advisors. And that's how we scaled the business, from having a system and a process that people could learn. And then we had a lot of advisors then, that maybe came to us that were, $100,000 producers that became $1 million producers because they learned a system and a process. And that's one thing I always took pride in, is really the financial advisors and really scaling and growing their business and teaching them how we did it and being able to, turn that into a process from marketing on down. Then you have to find great employees to do the work. Again, that's always a challenge, getting people, procedures, products, promotions going. And John Wooden said, which is not earth-shattering, but you think about it, it's like the team with the best players usually wins. So if you can get the best, the best talent that you can get for your business at that time, is going to put you in a better chance to win. So businesses, definitely selling. I think one of the things that entrepreneurs sometimes miss is that process, or somebody that wants to start a business. And they look at all the different aspects of the business, and you sometimes get tied up in the minutia of the business, and you kind of don't get down to the fact that you have to sell. So as a president of a company, I was still the chief salesperson, and I'll always be a salesperson, for whatever I do, because that's how the process goes. I remember an individual that was in my Rotary group. He was a heck of a nice guy, and he was in the leasing business. And he started his own business, went on his own, and he didn't really do well. In fact, the business didn't make it. He's talked to me about it, and it's like I knew everything there was to know about leasing. I knew every aspect of this business. I've done every single piece of it, but he didn't focus on what you had to do first, which was the sales process. So putting that action into there. Without sales, you can't sustain any ongoing business. You can't waste a lot of times, with meetings, vendors, perfecting products. You're looking at your phone systems, computer systems. I mean, you can get bogged down in that so easily and spend so much time on that, and just how you're going to organize your day. But it all starts with sales. And if you don't have sales, it really doesn't matter. You're not going to have a business very long. So here's how I started. So I started as a financial advisor, but I didn't have any clients, right? So you can kind of see the process and the scalability, and hopefully see vertical integration in every step of the way of what I was doing. So I started with a phone. So I had on Thursday, that was my dialing day. So I would dial 300 dials every Thursday. I wouldn't stop until I had 300 dials. And then there was a little bar that we had close on Thursday that had dollar drinks after dialing for 300. So we used to, that would be the next stop after the 300 dials on Thursday. But my goal was to try to get 10 appointments for the following week. So, you get better on the phone. You get better as to how you're doing that, your approach, what you're doing. My first meeting then was to really get them to demonstrate enough to them that I can get them to what we call a data session. So at the data session, that I would collect their own situation, and hopefully then I can put a plan together to have more specific recommendations. So that's what I was trying to do. So I did that. I did that for at least a year, and gradually developed a client base. Then I looked at this and I said, well, when I get it, it's hard to get an appointment. When I get an appointment, I'm spending several meetings educating that one client. So what I looked at next was, say, how can I educate more people at the same time to make my time more efficient? So instead of having 4 meetings with one client, why can't I get 30 people in a room, educate them in 3 or 4 meetings, and vastly expand what I'm doing, as opposed to doing one person at a time? So I started an educational process. So I started a class that is a retirement planning class. We kind of focused on that market. Why? The majority of the money in this country is held of people age 50 and over. I'm in the money business, so I'm targeting people age 50 and over. So I started doing this all educational. I don't talk about any companies, any products. It's not a stock picking class. It's just an educational class about different aspects of financial planning and retirement planning specifically. So instead of educating, one person at a time, all of a sudden now I was able to partner with the different colleges, universities, park districts. Again, I had to go out and sell and find those locations. But now I was able to get 30 people or more sometimes in a room for 3 to 4 evenings. So we started doing 4 evenings. The market changed. Now we do 3 evenings. I started that 30 years ago, and it still works today, which is amazing. I thought by now this would have run its course. It would never work. I'll do some different, but people do in my business want to have a personal relationship, it seems like, and not necessarily just deal with a LinkedIn ad or something like that. So now I was educating more people at a time. So marketing, just kind of systematically attracting clients versus sales. I didn't want to chase down clients one at a time anymore. So now I was starting to more effectively market instead of chasing down those clients. So I'm marketing to dozens, and thousands, sometimes or more simultaneously. So then I start to vertically integrate more things. So the firm I was with was a little limited in the product offerings that they had. So a lot of the bigger firms are kind of like that. They're a little bit more proprietary in what they do. So we went independent. I wanted to offer more to clients. So from that, now I had a marketing system that was working effectively. Now I'm able to, by going independent, I was able to now offer more to my clients, expand the offering, start to add more revenue streams because I had more things to offer, more ways to really enhance and benefit that client, more ways for them to look at me as the point person for all things financial. Not that I can do everything, but I could be the referral source sometimes as well. But you essentially want to control the relationship and the client. So then from there, after going independent, I made the decision to really go and start my own firm. So the reason I did that at that particular time was the firm I was with. I was one of their top couple producers. They had about 1,000 reps, which was great. So they were growing and expanding, even though they're an independent firm. But then there were some things that being on an advisory board there that I noticed that weren't the best. And not to get into that too much, but I was a little concerned. And after I left and went on to start my own firm, put it this way, the SEC knocked on their door on every office on the same day. So that kind of tells you what, without getting into that, but some of the things that I saw that I wasn't comfortable with. So I started my own firm. So when I started my own firm, basically we bought a small shell of a broker dealer. The only thing that helped us with was that some of the licensing and so forth was already done, so it speeded up the process for me. So that's why we kind of looked at a shell. And they had a clearing relationship that was already in place that we already knew and were affiliated with. So it kind of sped up our time horizon for that as well. So initially we did that because we just wanted to control our own destiny. We were good financial producers. We were, but we didn't want other people's decision to affect us or our clients. So the reason for starting my own firm wasn't to build a bigger firm initially, or to have a whole bunch of reps and advisors, but was really to me to have the peace of mind that my business was safe, was protected, and I could control my destiny, as opposed to somebody else making decisions that maybe I wouldn't agree with, that would negatively affect either me or my business. But then the landscape changed again. So what happened is really the internet. And all of a sudden, we have the technology. It really starts to change dramatically in the business, and when you look at it, I couldn't really have all the things that I wanted to unless I could essentially offset the costs across a much wider group of people. So again, selfishly, when I started this, it was for my own business, but then it changed. It changed because I had to scale it to afford the type of technology that I needed, going forward. So we started, so in the process of being a financial advisor and a rep and dealing with my own client base, I started to build a firm at the same time, and grew that, kind of 1 and 2 reps at a time, to where we got up to where I had enough people and staff, to where we got up to about 200 people, 200 advisors. So, but I was always selling as president. I would always say I was the chief salesperson. I was recruiting the new reps, positioning the company, creating the vision, creating the buy-in from everyone. So still kind of doing all that at the same time. One of the things I always asked my advisors, sometimes when I was meeting with them, is, kind of what you're selling. If you look at a financial advisor and you say, what are you selling? And I always get different answers. someone would say, I do a lot of managed money, I do mutual funds, I do, more of insurance oriented. And I always said those answers are always wrong. Um, as advisors or as a business owner, I would look to you to say you're the product. So the advisors were the product. And I said, if you look at whatever business that you're in and you draw a circle around your office and you draw maybe 5 miles, 10 miles out, depending on where you're located, somebody probably has something pretty similar. But what they don't have is they don't have you, right? You're the difference. And I always try to emphasize that with the advisors and the people that are recruited and the trading products. It's not that you have the best, even though you're trying to differentiate yourself with your product and the different types of offerings like I described, it's really you are the best and only product. So as a business owner, you're still that. You can't lose that. And why people do business with you, but people work with who they like. And you can't really get away from that overall. So 5 simple truths, I would say, believe in yourself and your value proposition. If you're going to persuade somebody that's going to come and do business with you, you have to believe in yourself and your value proposition first. I think the more someone likes you, the more confidence they'll have in you. Your enthusiasm has always got to be high. If you're the leader of the organization, you can't really have down days, and my wife came out, sometimes when we're doing conferences and things like that and say, how do you just have to be on the whole time, right? You always have to be on. You can't be off. You can be off when you get back to your room by yourself, but you have to be the leader of the organization. You have to have the enthusiasm. Trust is non-commodity. I can't even talk today. Commoditized, but you need to, in our business, financial services, trust is everything. But in any business, trust is everything. If somebody doesn't trust you, and you think about who you do business with, and if you've had a negative experience in some way, often you're not going to go back to that. So you can drive revenue to your firm the more trust that you can create. But trust is not a commodity. It's something that has to be created, and it's something that you have to build on. And that's trust with your clients, but also trust with employees. And that can't change. And when that trust isn't there, it changes everything, changes the culture. As a business owner, next to your health, I think your confidence, you always have to look at it, as you're going to be a top achiever, you're going to be at the top, and that, has to be one of your most valuable assets. But, you have to ask yourself, do you believe in your level of service looking at your business right now? In the ability and sincerity of your staff? Is there any problems out there that you need to correct? Is your process, your products, your ethics? If there's any questions about any of that, that you have, and taking a good self-examination of yourself and your business, you can't really create the trust unless you have all those answers comfortably with yourself. So I always, you look at and kind of do a little exercise every now and then, but, why I would do business with my firm, why would you not? If there's any reasons that you can think of when you kind of do a self-analysis of your firm or whatever company or organization that you have, why wouldn't you do business there? Really developing that list and an action plan to converting those negatives to positives, I think, is important. But you have to do self-assessments like this, I think, periodically. And sometimes we'll do that also with our client base. We just do surveys. So we'll go out to the clients, do a survey, and try to get honest answers, from those surveys and see what we can improve on. Mistakes. So I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. These are just a few of them. I can probably go on for pages on mistakes, but loyalty is probably one of the things that where sometimes I didn't make decisions quick enough because you were loyal to somebody. And loyalty is a good trait to have, but in business sometimes if things aren't working the way they should be, then you need to make a decision faster. One of the things that I had is, I had a partner in the business, and in the early stages, as we got going, kind of realized that he couldn't contribute to the same level. And it got more dramatic later. And it's something that I should have done earlier than what I did. Because then all of a sudden you're doing 100% of the work, or you feel like you are. You might be not doing 100, but you feel like you are, without, the full reward. So sometimes that decision is tough. And I think partnerships, if you're in a partnership, it's just not easy. I mean, partnerships are challenging. And kind of, if you're getting into a partnership, you should do as much work on how you get out of the partnership, as much work as you're getting in the partnership, because a lot of those are challenging to keep going forward, because you'll develop at different rates, times, and you'll both grow with the business at different intervals. And one person may not be able to grow at the same rate the way the business needs you to grow. Fail to recognize the changes in compliance environment in the industry. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've made. I said, kind of at that stage 3 level, is not really putting enough back into systems at that point. So failure to invest in more systems earlier. And that's hard to do sometimes, because you're taking a step back maybe in profitability, but to get to the scalability that you need going forward, there may be more of an investment, than what you're prepared to do, but the investment sometimes is more important to get to the next level. And I would say probably not recognizing that fast enough. I would say the other mistake is just really sometimes being a little bit too open, communicating very honestly. That all sounds good, right? But sometimes people interpret things a little bit differently. And, sometimes I was always saying, I would want my advisors to know what I would like to know. If I'd like to know what, I'd like to share that with them. But sometimes, being a little bit too open, when things maybe aren't to the final stage, they shouldn't be shared, maybe at that time, which is kind of hard to do when you're getting questions about certain things. The last thing was not letting go of my client base. Well, I really didn't want to. That's what I enjoyed the most. But to really get to that stage 4 level where I didn't get to, I really couldn't be a financial advisor anymore. I really had to take the next step, and that I couldn't do. So that's kind of one of the reasons that I kind of made the decision to sell in that stage 3, when we were about, 40 million or so of revs, before I had to take on the next level. It's not the only reason, but that's definitely one of the reasons. So I sold in stage 3. Why? Well, one, quality of life. I would have had to give up, the thing that I enjoyed the most, which was working with my own clients. I like developing products. I like working with the advisors, the reps, but really, a lot of people were attracted, to the firm, kind of being a boutique, smaller firm with a couple hundred reps, because of what I could teach them, and because I was one of them. They didn't see me as someone that was just kind of the staring down from the top without really having the experiences that they had. Because I could always share with them that, I've already done it. I can help you do it. And it's a little bit different than what most firms are run by. Most firms are run in my business by people that never had a client. So they don't have that same experience. Risk. I would have had, to really look at outside capital for further growth, which presents a lot of risk. Bringing in new partners, maybe some debt, maybe some equity. But I'd had to really look at kind of growing more through either merger acquisition at that stage. And I'd made the decision that I didn't really want to go that route. The partner, so I told you about that. So he was older, he wanted to exit. He really wasn't involved in the growth or the management at this point. So the timing wasn't right. So I really had 2 situations. I had to get him bought out and then really look at capital. So I decided not to do that. And then the other thing that I didn't like about part of the business was the regulatory legal environment that changed. And when you look at that in our space, in my space, every single year, and these are on the regulator's website, but 5 to 7% of the firms went away every year. We were never added firms. We just keep subtracting firms. And that's kind of what the regulators wanted. So through consolidation, mergers, buyouts, bankruptcies, but the regulatory environment changed to such where they don't want as many firms. So you can't fight that, So again, at stage 3, that seemed like the point to go. Also for the